Imagine a CEO is about to sign off on a $100 million corporate merger. Like the ink is practically drying on the contract.
Right. High stakes.
Exactly. And suddenly, a massive spike of anomalous traffic hits your external network. What is it? I mean, is it a rival corporation trying to steal intellectual property right before the deal closes?
Or is it a state-sponsored attack?
Yeah. Or, is it just a broken marketing API that got stuck in a refresh loop? If you are the person responsible for that network, you have maybe, 10 minutes to give that CEO an answer.
If you're lucky.
Right. And that answer better be right. So today we're taking a deep dive into this fascinating stack of intelligence Tradecraft guides. They basically show you exactly how to answer that question with absolute mathematical certainty.
Yeah, it is. It's honestly a completely different way of looking at the tools most organizations already use every single day. We're talking about taking a standard corporate tech stack, so things like Obsidian, Google Workspace, Google Cloud Platform, Cloudflare, and applying actual intelligence community Tradecraft to it.
And the mission here, as outlined in these sources, isn't just about, tweaking your IT infrastructure or managing help desk tickets.
Ew, not at all.
We're exploring how you transition from being a system administrator or a security analyst into what these guides call an objective sensemaker or an intelligence architect. We're going to explore how you take the absolute chaos of massive data sets and transform it to generate foresight, conduct covert operations with total stealth, and, honestly, give your leadership absolute strategic certainty.
And if you are listening to this right now and thinking, my IT department barely keeps the internal network running, let alone runs covert intelligence operations, you really need to stick with us. Because the tools to do this are probably already sitting in your software stack.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, in the current corporate landscape, executives are terrified. They are operating in a world of total information overload. They're dealing with massive groupthink, and they face the very real threat of making incredibly expensive decisions based on, flawed assumptions.
Right, which happens all the time.
Exactly. So mastering these specific intelligence techniques makes you the ultimate fail-safe against that panic. You stop being the person who just, reports network uptime, and you become the person who delivers the ground truth reality of the business environment.
So how do we actually get to that ground truth reality? Because looking through the sources, the very first step actually has nothing to do with configuring servers or writing code.
Nope.
It is entirely about mastering human cognition. The guides introduce this concept of Structured Analytic Techniques, or SATs.
Yeah, and cognitive security is arguably the most overlooked vulnerability in corporate tech. I mean, we spend millions securing our endpoints, building firewalls, encrypting data.
Oh yeah, huge budgets for that.
Right. But we do absolutely nothing to secure our thinking. Structured analytic techniques are frameworks used heavily by intelligence agencies. They are designed to systematically eliminate cognitive bias, force you to challenge your underlying assumptions, and ensure that any conclusion you reach is driven strictly by objective evidence.
Not just a gut feeling.
Exactly. Not a gut feeling, and not just the loudest voice in the room demanding an answer.
And the Tradecraft details something called the Adversarial Analysis and Validation Framework to achieve this. And it starts surprisingly simply. You use Obsidian, which, for those who don't know, is like a highly customizable, locally hosted markdown note-taking app. You use it to create mandatory intake checklists.
Yeah, the checklists are huge.
Right, so when an incident happens, before any analyst is allowed to pull up a dashboard or start guessing what's going on, they are forced to answer the basic indicators: who, what, when, where, why.
That mandatory pause is absolutely critical, because if you miss those foundational indicators from, say, your Cloudflare logs or your GCP event streams right at the very beginning of an incident,
You're just flying blind.
worse than blind,
Yeah.
your entire downstream analysis is poisoned. You end up just looking for data to confirm your initial panic.
Right.
But where this framework gets incredibly rigorous and where it really separates an IT department from an intelligence unit is the next step: the analysis of competing hypotheses.
Okay, the ACH matrix.
The ACH matrix, which they actually recommend building out in a shared environment like Google Sheets.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's walk through exactly how that ACH matrix works, going back to that scenario I mentioned at the start of the deep dive. So that massive wave of anomalous traffic hits your Cloudflare edge network. The immediate human reaction in most security ops centers is to yell, "We're under attack, it's a state-sponsored DDoS."
Right, which is jumping to the most dramatic, high-stakes conclusion possible.
Exactly. So how does the matrix stop that?
Well, the ACH matrix physically prevents you from running with that single idea. Instead, you are forced to build a grid. On the top x-axis, you list multiple mutually exclusive hypotheses.
Okay.
So, hypothesis 1, state-sponsored DDoS. Hypothesis 2, a misconfigured internal API. Hypothesis 3, a completely benign traffic spike from, I don't know, a new unannounced marketing campaign.
Makes sense.
Then, on the y-axis, you list every single piece of technical evidence you actually have.
And here is the psychological trick that makes this so effective and what the sources really hammer home. You do not look at that grid and try to prove your favorite hypothesis.
No, that's confirmation bias.
Right. You use the evidence to objectively disprove the hypotheses. You are looking for what intelligence analysts call diagnosticity.
Diagnosticity, yes.
Which is a piece of evidence that is highly inconsistent with a specific scenario.
Precisely. So if you look at your GCP logs and see that the traffic spike is heavily authenticated, uses perfectly formatted internal tokens, and is entirely originating from your own secondary data center.
Okay, wow.
Right. That evidence is highly diagnostic. It completely disproves hypothesis 1 and hypothesis 3. I mean, a state-sponsored attacker wouldn't have perfectly signed internal tokens.
Obviously not.
And a public marketing campaign wouldn't originate from your own back-end servers. So you're left with hypothesis 2 by pure process of elimination.
It's a completely different way to troubleshoot. It's like diagnosing a car engine.
Yeah.
Instead of assuming the transmission is blown just because you hear a weird grinding noise and only looking for evidence of a broken transmission.
Which a lot of mechanics do, honestly.
Yeah. But instead of doing that, you use this systematic matrix to test and rule out the spark plugs, the serpentine belt, and the exhaust pipe first. You arrive at the truth by stripping away everything that is demonstrably false.
Exactly. And you can scale that exact same methodology up. The Tradecraft suggests running continuous exercises where you have one team act as the red team. They document theoretical attack vectors and strategic threats against your infrastructure directly in Obsidian.
Okay.
And simultaneously, you have a blue team mapping out how GCP Security Command Center would theoretically detect those exact vectors.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and by forcing those two opposing views into the ACH matrix, you synthesize them into a unified, bias-free purple team reality. So we've secured the mind and established a bias-free ground truth for what is happening right now.
Yeah, the present state.
But to provide true strategic value, we have to use that ground truth to predict what happens next.
Yeah, because having a bias-free snapshot of the present isn't enough. If leadership is going to make that multi-million-dollar decision, they don't just need to know what is happening in this exact second. They need to know what happens tomorrow.
Exactly.
So how do we take this static, perfectly analyzed snapshot of the present and make it predictive?
That requires shifting from static analysis to what the intelligence community calls the intelligence cycle, which is direction, collection, processing, analysis, and dissemination.
Okay.
The sources explain how to apply the cycle to your tech stack to generate what they term predictive value and decision superiority. You're no longer just looking at logs, you are building a sensing network that inherently gets smarter over time.
The technical evolution described in the guides for this is really fascinating. It usually starts with a pretty basic linear pipeline. You take your raw Cloudflare edge logs, you push them into a massive GCP BigQuery data lake, and an analyst looks at them to write up a static intelligence brief.
Right, standard procedure.
But the ultimate goal of this tradecraft is to reach a state of anticipatory orchestration.
Yeah, anticipatory orchestration is where you bring machine learning into the intelligence cycle. You apply GCP's machine learning tools, specifically Vertex AI, directly to that BigQuery data lake.
Okay, so the AI is scanning the lake.
Exactly. And the crucial detail here is that the AI isn't just looking for hard-coded threshold alerts, like flag us if traffic exceeds 10,000 requests. The ML models learn the deep, multidimensional baseline of your entire organization.
It learns what normal actually looks like.
Yes. It understands that a certain API usually sees 500 requests at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday from a very specific set of autonomous system numbers.
So when something deviates from that incredibly complex baseline, Vertex AI can identify it as a pre-incident anomaly before it ever breaches a standard security threshold.
Exactly.
And the automation they layer on top of this is wild. When that subtle anomaly hits the Cloudflare edge, the GCP infrastructure flags it, and then uses the Google Workspace API to automatically generate a structured flash brief draft.
It's so fast.
And it pushes that draft notification directly into the analyst's Obsidian vault.
Right, which drastically reduces the time to insight. The analyst opens their vault, and the preliminary data processing is already done.
Okay, hold on. Let me stop you there and play devil's advocate for the listener for a second.
Sure.
Because I have built corporate dashboards, and I know executives. They are already drowning in dashboard Slack alerts, emails, data points. If we are setting up a highly sensitive machine learning radar that catches even smaller, more subtle anomalies, aren't we just hitting them with a faster fire hose of automated alerts? Like, how is this actually helpful?
That is a very legitimate pushback, and it is exactly why the guides introduce the sense-making ontology.
Okay, what is that?
Well, if you just pipe Vertex AI alerts straight to a CEO, you have failed. The ontology is the filter. In this context, an ontology is a strict proprietary rulebook that you build within Obsidian. It defines exactly how different concepts, threats, and data points relate to each other. It's like a highly complex family tree for your corporate data.
So it's not about the volume of data, it's about mapping the relationships between the data. Give me a concrete example of how that ontology works in practice.
Okay, let's say your new predictive radar flags a slight, maybe 5% uptick in anomalous login attempts.
Happens all the time.
Right. And 30 minutes later, it flags a minor shift in geographic traffic routing. Separately, those are just two annoying alerts that an IT guy might completely ignore.
Yeah, just noise.
But your sense-making ontology automatically correlates them. It recognizes that anomalous logins plus geographic routing shifts targeting a specific database equals a high probability of an advanced persistent threat data exfiltration attempt.
Oh, wow. So it translates the technical dots into plain language business risks.
Exactly. And the final output of that process is the executive foresight brief, which is generated in Google Workspace. This document fundamentally shifts the executive conversation.
How so?
It doesn't give them a dashboard of raw numbers. It tells leadership exactly what happened. It dictates what is highly likely to happen next based on those correlated dots. And crucially, it presents 3 specific strategic options leadership should take right now to mitigate the risk.
All right, so we have a machine learning radar that looks into the future. We've secured our own thinking with the ACH matrix. But sometimes, verifying that future requires investigating threats or competitors or acquisition targets that sit completely outside of our own network.
Very true.
If we need to go out into the dark web or poke around a rival's infrastructure to confirm our hypotheses, how do we look outward without them seeing us looking back?
And that brings us to Intelligence Operational Security, OPSEC. And we have to draw a hard line here between standard IT OPSEC and intelligence OPSEC.
Okay, what's the difference?
Standard IT OPSEC is about building a secure fortress. You want strong walls, good encryption, zero trust architecture to protect your internal assets. Intelligence OPSEC is the exact opposite. It is about the art of leaving absolutely no footprints when you inevitably have to leave your fortress to gather information.
Because if your corporate IP address, or even like a tracking cookie associated with your corporate domain, shows up in the web server logs of an acquisition target,
You're busted.
yeah, you have just leaked your strategic intent to the market. The target now knows you are looking at them. To solve this, the Tradecraft outlines how to build a covert operations and engagement sandbox.
Right. And the foundational layer of that sandbox involves basic masking. So you use external Cloudflare proxy chains to hide your origin IP addresses.
Makes sense.
And you implement strict Google Workspace data loss prevention rules, DLP rules, to ensure that a researcher doesn't accidentally copy-paste a document containing corporate letterhead or internal tracking links into an external environment.
Oh, that'd be bad.
Very bad. But the truly expert tier of this tradecraft is persona management.
Okay, this is the part of the source material that absolutely blew my mind. You literally synthesize fake human beings. You use Google Cloud Platform to spin up completely isolated virtual desktop interfaces, or VDIs, and you tie these remote desktops to synthetic personas.
Right. In intelligence parlance, these are known as sock puppets.
Sock puppets, yeah. But you don't just make up a fake name and open a browser. You manage the entire life cycle of these personas in your Obsidian vault.
Exactly.
You maintain strict air-gapped databases tracking their deeply detailed backstories. You track their specific digital footprints, their active time zones, their payment methods, their browser histories.
Mhm.
Why is Obsidian so crucial for this specific task?
Because of the risk of identity bleed.
Identity bleed.
Yeah. Imagine you have three synthetic personas operating simultaneously. You've got a technical cybersecurity researcher, a disgruntled former employee of a competitor, and an independent financial auditor. If you accidentally log into the researcher's Twitter account while using the IP address assigned to the financial auditor, or if they accidentally share a single tracking cookie, the entire operation is burned.
Because they linked them together.
Exactly. Any sophisticated adversary will instantly see the correlation, so Obsidian acts as your completely offline, air-gapped ledger to guarantee that these digital lives never cross paths and cross-contaminate your intelligence gathering.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The Tradecraft takes it even further with signature deception. This isn't just putting on a digital mask. It is like building a fully functioning decoy car.
Yes.
The sources explain how to use Cloudflare workers to dynamically alter your HTTP headers at the edge. You can manipulate your user agent string, your accept language headers, your X-forwarded for data.
So to the outside world, your operational traffic doesn't look like it's coming from a massive server rack in a New York corporate headquarters. The Cloudflare worker dynamically alters the digital exhaust fumes of your connection so that it perfectly mimics, say, a user on a mobile phone browsing on a 4G connection from a cafe in Tokyo.
It's like sending a digital undercover agent into a rival organization, complete with a fake mustache and a backstory, while keeping the corporate headquarters completely invisible.
That's a great way to put it. And while you are out there gathering data invisibly, you can also set traps at home.
Oh, the honeypots?
Yeah, the guides detail deploying honeypots within your Google Workspace. You draft a highly realistic but entirely fake mergers and acquisitions strategy document.
Sneaky.
Very. You place it in a seemingly secure but subtly accessible folder, and you link the access logs directly to GCP's backend.
So if an insider threat or a compromised account or an external competitor attempts to access that fake document,
You instantly capture their digital signature, their methods, and their intent. Meanwhile, your actual sanitized ground truth intelligence stays completely isolated in your offline Obsidian clean room.
Okay, let's take a step back and look at what we've built here. We are gathering covert intel using decoy mobile connections in Tokyo. We are predicting the future using Vertex AI on massive data lakes. And we are stripping away our own human bias using the ACH matrix. We've built an incredible system.
A very powerful one.
But, and this is the big but, when you walk into the boardroom and hand this incredible, highly sensitive, almost unbelievable executive foresight brief to a CEO, how do you mathematically prove to them that it is actually true?
Right.
I mean, in an era of rampant AI hallucinations, deepfakes, and poison threat feeds, how do they know this isn't just your gut feeling wrapped in fancy jargon?
That is the final and undoubtedly the most critical hurdle for an intelligence architect: source vetting and data pedigree.
Right.
When you are presenting strategic intelligence, you are ultimately selling verifiable trust. If the leadership team cannot verify exactly where a piece of information came from, the intelligence is basically useless.
And the framework they use to guarantee this is called the Information Integrity and Provenance Pipeline. And it starts at the absolute perimeter of the network with foundational binary trust. In their Cloudflare configuration, this means implementing strict mutual TLS or MTLS routing.
Yeah, and for those unfamiliar with MTLS, it is a cryptographic handshake between the client and the server.
Right.
It ensures that at the fundamental network layer, traffic is either mathematically authenticated with a verified certificate and therefore trusted, or the connection is immediately severed.
Period.
Exactly. There is no middle ground. It prevents unauthorized devices from ever injecting data into your pipeline in the first place.
But the really fascinating part is how they handle and grade the actual intelligence once it makes it inside the network.
Yeah.
They use something called the Admiralty scale.
The Admiralty system is a classic military and naval intelligence tool, and porting it into a corporate IT environment is just brilliant.
How does it work?
You build a rigid metadata schema in Obsidian to grade every single piece of information that enters your system. You evaluate the source reliability on a strict scale from A, which means consistently reliable, all the way down to F, which means the reliability cannot be judged.
Okay, and then you separately evaluate the information credibility on a numerical scale from 1 to 6, where 1 is confirmed by independent sources and 6 means the truthfulness cannot be judged.
Exactly. So let's say a new threat feed comes in from one of your synthetic personas poking around on a dark web forum. The analyst doesn't just write a summary saying, hey, we might be attacked.
Right, that's too vague.
They run it through the matrix and assign it a hard alphanumeric grade. Let's say it gets a B2, which translates to usually reliable source, and the information is probably true.
And here is where the tech stack integration really shines. That specific B2 grade isn't just typed into a document somewhere to be forgotten. It is preserved as structural metadata.
Yeah.
As that intelligence moves out of Obsidian, gets transformed by BigQuery, and synthesized by Vertex AI, GCP Cloud audit logs track its exact lineage. Every single time that data is touched, moved, or altered, a cryptographic log entry is generated.
Which means by the time that intelligence reaches the final Google Doc for the executive team, the executive dashboard includes a highly detailed data pedigree appendix.
So if a CEO looks at a massive strategic claim in paragraph 3 and says, wait, are we sure about this? You don't just say, trust me.
Never.
You open the data pedigree appendix. You map the claim from the Google Doc backward to the B2 metadata tag in Obsidian, backward through the exact GCP transformation log, all the way down to the specific MPLS authenticated Cloudflare edge request that brought the data in.
It creates an immutable audit vault. You are eliminating doubt for leadership because you are proving that your documentation is never just a subjective opinion. It is a mathematically, cryptographically, and procedurally verifiable fact.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like putting a microscopic GPS tracker and a notary stamp on every single piece of data, from the exact millisecond it hits our server to the moment it lands on the CEO's desk.
And that is the entire objective.
Wow. We have covered incredible ground today. We started by completely reimagining how we troubleshoot and analyze data using structured analytic techniques in the ECH matrix to strip away human panic.
Yeah, we built a predictive radar with Vertex AI.
We deployed digital sock puppets for covert research, dynamically altering our digital exhaust in Tokyo. And we wrapped it all in an immutable chain of custody using the Admiralty scale.
For you listening, the core takeaway is the paradigm shift. By applying these INT Tradecraft principles, you're no longer just an engineer or analyst. You are the architect of ground truth reality for your organization.
Which leaves us with one final lingering question for you to ponder. If you can synthesize fake personas, manipulate digital signatures across the globe, and dictate the ultimate ground truth of your organization, at what point does your corporate IT department stop being an IT department and start becoming its own private intelligence agency? And more importantly, how does that shift change the ethical responsibility of the person sitting at your keyboard? Keep diving deep, and we'll catch you next time.